By the early spring of 1899, the global telegraph system had effectively ceased to exist. The sky above the Earth was no longer a silent, blue vault of air. It was a roaring, shifting furnace of electromagnetic fire. The permanent, blazing auroras had descended far beyond the poles, reaching all the way to the equator, their brilliant emerald and crimson sheets casting a cold, flickering, and alien light over the crowded streets of London, Paris, New York, and Bombay. The heavy iron wires that spanned the continents and connected the empires of men had become dangerous, unpredictable conductors, surging constantly with massive, uncontainable induction currents drawn down from the bleeding atmosphere. These sudden surges melted the brass keys in the stations, shattered the glass insulators on the poles, and set the bustling telegraph offices ablaze in the middle of the night. The world was rapidly shrinking, its loud, confident voices silenced one by one, as the Earth's decaying magnetic field struggled and failed to deflect the relentless fury of the solar wind. In the grand oak-paneled lecture halls and quiet libraries of the Royal Institution in London, Lord Kelvin and Arthur stood before an assembly of the world's leading physicists, geologists, and astronomers. They presented the translated maps, the mathematical proofs of the countdown, and the detailed schematics of the lithic sanctuaries to an audience that was simply too terrified and too proud to believe them. The press and the scientific establishment called it the Abyssal Madness. The academics, completely secure in their long-held theories of a fundamentally unchanging, mechanical universe governed by predictable laws, dismissed the translations out of hand. They argued fiercely that the data was nothing more than the stress-induced hallucinations of men who had spent far too much time isolated in the damp, vibrating cabins of cable ships. They insisted that the brilliant auroras were merely a passing atmospheric storm, a rare but temporary meteorological phenomenon, and that the frightening fluctuations of the magnetic needle would soon return to their normal, predictable paths. They could not, and would not, accept that their sprawling cities, their massive steel factories, and their global empires were built on a thin, fragile crust of rock that was about to be mercilessly swept by the sterilizing fire of the sun. They preferred to believe in the comforting safety of their own ignorance, waiting stubbornly for the storm to pass and for the wires to go quiet. But the wires did not simply go quiet. They broke. On the 12th of April, a massive submarine earthquake, triggered by the shifting, unstable magnetic currents of the molten outer core, ripped through the Atlantic shelf with unimaginable violence. The great transatlantic telegraph cable, the SS Faraday's absolute masterpiece of engineering, the thread that had bound the old world to the new, was snapped violently by the sliding tectonic plates of the seabed, its thick copper core severed and instantly swallowed by the crushing clay. In the quiet test room at Kensington, the green spot of light on the mirror galvanometer gave one final, erratic, and frantic swing across the scale, and then went completely flat. The connection was lost. The ancient monument at the bottom of the Atlantic abyss had fallen silent, its long task finally completed, leaving humanity utterly alone with the translation, the blueprints, and the countdown. "They will not speak to us again, Arthur," Kelvin said, his voice weak and raspy as he sat deeply in his leather armchair, his heavy woolen blanket pulled tight against the cold, damp draft of the study. He looked decades older now, his hands trembling visibly as he held the bound logbooks containing the translation. "They have said absolutely everything that needed to be said. They built the beacon, they waited millions of years for a species with the intellect to find it and the wisdom to listen, and they freely gave us the keys to our own survival. The rest is entirely up to us." "But they are still down there, sir," Arthur said, looking down at the detailed, hand-drawn charts of the Earth's crust spread across the desk. "In the deep basalt, in the mantle. They are living down there in the quiet and the dark, while we are up here preparing to burn." "Yes," Kelvin whispered, closing his eyes against the flickering green light coming through the window. "They survived, and they have shown us exactly how to follow them. But a proud people who will not believe the warning will never possess the humility to build the ships needed to cross the dark. We are a stubborn, arrogant race, Arthur. I fear we would rather drown in the blinding light of the surface than live in the shadow of the rock. The season finale of the Victorian age was not played out with the grand, triumphant fanfare that the Empire had expected. It was played out in the frightened silence of the laboratories and the quiet, creeping panic of the city streets. The gas lamps in London were no longer lit by the lamplighters. There was simply no need for them under a sky that glowed perpetually with the eerie green fire of the descending auroras. The great steam engines still rattled on the rails, but their coal was running low, and the global shipping lanes were entirely empty, the captains refusing to sail their iron ships into the Atlantic without the guidance of their compasses. The world was waiting, its eyes turned upward to the burning sky in fear, watching the steady, inexorable thinning of the air. On the final, freezing night of the century, Arthur stood entirely alone on the edge of the high white cliffs of Dover, looking out across the English Channel. The water churning far below was a dark, restless mirror, reflecting the brilliant green and red auroras that danced across the heavens like the ghosts of a dying world. In his cold, gloved hand, he held the heavy, leather-bound ledger containing the complete and final translation of the Abyssal Broadcasts, the complex mathematics of the acoustic drills, the structural maps of the deep mantle, and the stark warnings of the senders. He knew, with a sudden and absolute clarity, that the work would begin. It would not begin in the grand parliaments or the loud, public squares of the capitals. It would begin in secret, driven by necessity and terror. It would begin in the deep, black coal mines of Wales, in the hard basalt quarries of Scotland, and in the deep iron shafts of America. A small, dedicated few who truly believed the math and understood the science would begin to dig, turning their steam shovels and their dynamite inward, carving the first rough, desperate shafts down into the solid granite. We would build our own deep sanctuaries, not as proud conquerors of the earth, but as humble refugees seeking the mercy and the shelter of the rock. The ocean did not ever speak to us again. The great cable lay broken and silent in the freezing mud, a tragic monument to our brief, bright attempt to bind the surface of the world together. But as Arthur looked down at the dark, crashing sea, he knew that the abyss was not a tomb. It was a cradle. And the fragile wire we had dropped into the dark was not a connection between the bustling cities of the living, but a bridge to the survivors of the past, waiting patiently for us to join them in the permanent, quiet sanctuary of the deep. This was the end of the first season. This was the silence of the Watchers. This was the Silent Watchers.